start with some quick intros and then we can dive into why we're here. I'll go first. My name's Molly Wheaton. I'm a co-founder at Earn Better. We're a company that uses AI to help people in the job search. The job search sucks, so we're trying to make it easier for job seekers by giving them free tools to help them save time and be more efficient. Before Earn Better, I spent 10 years at various tech companies across a bunch of different functions, such as recruiting, operations, client management. I'm based in Austin, Texas, and would love to know where y'all are tuning in from. So feel free to comment with your location. And I'm excited to be here with Giovanna. And Giovanna, do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Giovanna Ventola. I am the founder of Rhize, which is the largest free online community supporting the emotional well-being and professional development of our workforce. So that's sort of our long form. Basically, it's a safe space community for unemployed people and job seekers to connect, share resources, and we provide workshops and resources like Earn Better, which is how Molly and I got connected. Before that, I worked in corporate for almost 10 years. Unfortunately, was laid off 3 times in 3 years, and that's sort of what inspired Rhize. Before corporate, I was actually a contemporary ballet dancer. So we're kind of all over the place with my experience, but I think that sort of lends itself to how I ended up here. So I'm
I did
excited to
not
have
know
this
that.
conversation. Oh, yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. And quick plug on Rhize. It's a great community. Actually, the reason I was introduced to Giovanna is one of our job seekers from Earn Better was like, you got to check out Rhize. They're doing great things. And so I joined the community and love what you guys are doing over there.
So cool. Thank you.
But yeah, so why are we here? We first met in August and kind of like immediately clicked. Both of our organizations are aligned in helping job seekers. And again, couldn't be more supportive of what she's building. And we wanted to host an event to chat through her journey as a job seeker, how she founded Rhize, and then some of the common issues that job seekers face in today's market. So that's what we're going to do today. Please comment and ask questions throughout the event. I'm going to try to stay present in the conversation, so I might not see your questions immediately, but we'll try to take a look at those throughout the event. If not, we'll get to them at the end. We definitely want to hear from you. And if we don't get to your question, feel free to follow up with either of us one-on-one, and we'll get back to you. All right, so let's get started. Not to sound like you're in a job interview, but let's start with your background and your story.
Yeah, so I know I touched on it a little bit, but I was a professional ballet dancer for a while. Started in corporate in 2015. I started as an executive assistant for a CEO at a real estate development firm. Great experience. Within a year, I was promoted and I started working in commercial brokerage, asset management, leasing management. Thought my career was going on the up and up. Got a big promotion, left that company after a couple years, and then COVID hit, which started my cycle of layoffs. And, my thing is I've been laid off 3 times in 3 years. And I was very desperate after the third time because it is embarrassing to continue going back to your same network and asking for help again. So I went on TikTok to try to expand my professional network or personal network or find people who were going through it. Thought I would find maybe 5 or 10 people, found thousands, which made me realize I'm not alone dealing with this stuff. So my first TikTok video was in January. I put out a call to action in March to anyone who wants an accountability buddy in this job search. And I got hundreds of emails, moved everybody into a Slack channel. From there, it actually was called the unemployed community because I didn't know what to call it, but it grew so fast. And I'm sure you see this with all of the job seekers that use your platform. The people that are unemployed are, shouldn't be. I mean, they're very qualified and, smart and dedicated. And I had a moment where I was like, unemployed shouldn't be a word used to define these people, which is what sparked the rebrand. And while doing all of that, it just continued to grow. So that
I
is
love it.
Yeah, that's the sort of quick 5-second story.
No, and I really like the reframing it from unemployed because that shouldn't define somebody, even though I know it's difficult when you are on a job search for that not to be front and center. But I really
Yeah.
like how you framed that.
Yeah, it was a word. It's a word that I mean, I don't think it's a bad word, but it is. And, when you go into interviews, the first question they ask is, why do you have a resume gap or what happened here? And you're immediately drawn or you're pushed to talk about a time in your life that maybe you don't want to speak about. And so you don't really have a choice. So I didn't want to use that word to define such a positive, supportive community, especially of people who, I mean, there's so many other words I would use to describe them before that, so just
Totally.
naturally happened.
And especially over the last few years, like if we've learned anything, like anyone and everyone has been impacted. So yeah,
Yeah,
I totally agree with that.
yeah.
And so where is Rise today?
So currently, we have over 3,000 members actively networking in a Slack channel. We are still in Slack. It is still free. It will always be free. We have, a regular schedule of virtual networking calls within the community. We have a, resource board. We have a bunch of stuff that job seekers need to support their journey and all of that. But as we're growing, we're starting to partner with companies like Earn Better to provide these resources and educate our members on how to use these resources appropriately. Um, there's a lot of AI out there. And so there's a lot of people that get confused on what to
Hmm.
use. And so the more information I feel that people have about these tools, they can pick the one that resonates with them the most. Um, we are, I've had my members in there a couple months now. We take demographic surveys, we take psychographic surveys. So I have a very good understanding of who's in there. And what we've realized is there's a lot of people in there that were in the high parts of their career when they were laid off, or they were laid off multiple times from director positions because those are the ones that are cut first. So we've also started implementing professional development workshops in the sense of like, okay, here's a tool, you can use this tool, that's great. But also, do you want to upskill? Do you want to learn about entrepreneurship? Do you want to learn about a different industry? And we've had a mix of using the experts that are in the community to teach, which I kind of call, what is it, like when you skill swap and it's like
Hmm.
you're learning social sharing, social skill sharing, and then bringing in companies that are experts or speakers that are experts in a field that people want to learn about. So
I
it's a
love,
mix.
yeah, no, and I love the kind of homegrown aspect because, as you mentioned, there's so many great, like intelligent, wonderful people in the community. So you might as well hone in on each other's skill sets and knowledge bases and then
Yeah.
use those to help each other. And
Yeah.
then you've touched on it, but one thing I would want to add, and again, I'm just kind of a bystander in there, but I go in every once in a while and kind of look. There's just such a good sense of camaraderie and community, which is something a lot of job seekers are looking for because, as you know, the job search can be really isolating. It can bring up like feelings of failure and all of that. And so it's nice to have people around you that are going through the same thing that you can talk to because you don't always want to talk to your friends or family about it. In fact, a lot of the times you probably don't want to. um, but I think that's a good segue to the next topic. It's just like the roller coaster of job seeker feelings. I know there's a lot to uncover in this category, and we want to touch on a few things specifically. Maybe we could start with imposter syndrome and sort of your stance on that and kind of how you guys talk about that in the community.
That's a topic that comes up weekly in our calls. Imposter syndrome, I have it. I went from being a ballet dancer to all of a sudden an asset manager to being laid off 3 times in 3 years to now a founder. It's very hard for me. And I thought I was the only one that had this curse. But what I've realized is the job search process itself contributes really heavily to imposter syndrome. And when you're being let go. So you're already feeling like your skills weren't enough to keep you somewhere. And then you're either getting ghosted or, you don't get a job. And so you start questioning your own skill set. You start questioning what you're even doing. Like, we had a call one time and somebody said, um, I have to go back and write down all my accomplishments from every job I've had. And as I'm writing them down to sort of come up with this story for my resume, I think to myself, like, did I actually do that? Or it's like, she's like, I started gaslighting myself because I was like, did I really do that? Or, and so that's her, she was saying like her imposter syndrome creeping in. And the hard thing with that is once you get to that point, it's really, really hard to get out of it. And so it's something that we acknowledge, like I said, on a weekly basis to sort of help each other. Like, okay, what are you doing this week to get through it? Whether it's, affirmations, or somebody said they literally wrote their new story for their life. And I'm like, can you share with the class how you did that and what you did? And so, yeah, I think the more we talk about it, the more you realize everyone has it, it'll be easier just to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Or you text your buddy and you're like, hey, I'm feeling it today. What do I
Yeah, and
do?
it's also not something that I was talking to a friend about this yesterday, but confidence isn't linear. It's not like, oh, I have it today in this area, so I'm going to have it forever. And so it does ebb and flow, but I love that, like how you guys are normalizing it and talking about it, because everybody has it, or
Yeah.
I think it's very natural to have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Closely tied to this, but I think another important one is just like the concept of mental health and self-esteem, and how those can be impacted in the job search, and sort of how you guys talk about that, or any tips you have for kind of combating those.
Um, we talk mental health is an everyday topic in the group. We have specific channels for it. We have calls that are focused on mental health. And one of our goals is to provide free or low cost resources, like information about those things to our members. Because I'm not a licensed professional, none of us are. But if somebody needs something, we'd like to be like, these are where you can look at for whatever in your state. These are things, websites you can go to. So we try to keep a running list. But in terms of mental health, Rise was made out of this concept and idea of a safe space where no judgment zone, what you say is received and validated. And then we try to, not in a toxic positivity way, but try to provide a solution or some level of support so that it's not just constant venting. We always try to, like, add a light to the end of the conversation. And I think because we've sort of everybody has agreed to this social norm now in the group, the support that I see in the channels and on the calls is just it's like these people have known each other forever and want the best for each other, and that's like the environment we've created. So when it comes to mental health, people are sharing truthfully where they're at, and
Hmm.
I think is that your dog? I think that when you're able to do that in a safe space, it takes away the looming presence that it has on you. I've cried in a lot of our networking calls. Like, I've had a very, tough go with all this stuff, and like I'll just start crying and I'm like, I got to shut my camera off, and people are like, "No, it's okay. Like, you're actually making me feel okay to feel this way." And I'm like, "Okay, well, if my, you know, tears can help somebody, I'm happy." But I think it's just this idea of normalizing it and accepting it. And we have to get away from this idea that your professional life is separate from your personal life and you're not supposed to be emotional. It's like it's your livelihood. You can be emotional about it. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's
you know,
a very personal experience.
yeah.
But I love that you guys have a safe space and encourage people to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And again, like the camaraderie that comes out of it. And like, like there's the venting channel, which
Yeah.
sometimes people need to do that. And that's okay. If you're having a bad day and then maybe somebody responds in a way that kind of picks you up, that's exactly what you're looking for. So
Yeah. And it's
I
the
like that.
validation piece. That's what we really focus on. It's like I think it's just you want to be seen. And so if you share an experience and someone shares the same experience, y- I- you feel 100 times better, and then you're ready to find a solution. So I think that's that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's not me. It's not Molly. I'm not the problem.
Right.
There's many other people going through this.
Hmm.
Um, The last one I think we want to touch on for kind of like the roller coaster category was like how you talk about or deal with like any sort of like guilt or shame that is attached to any of the various reasons why you might exit a company.
The guilt and shame piece, I think, is the heaviest piece and contributes to everything else we just talked about, right? Everybody's embarrassed about why they left a company. So it's interesting, even though you're laid off and you're like, it's not a performance thing or whatever, there's still a guilt associated with it. Then you have the people that are laid off or let go, but kind of made to feel that it's their fault. Now there's this whole other group of people who left jobs because it was a toxic environment and feel guilt and shame because of that. And then they almost feel guilty and shame around an unemployed person because they're like, oh, well, or around somebody who got laid off because they're like, I made this choice. They didn't make this choice. And then they feel worse. Again, like I think bringing these things to the forefront of a conversation helps everybody so much. And, you know, guilt and shame are horrible psychological feelings and they contribute to a lot of other things like depression and things like that. So we try to talk about it and normalize it as much as possible. And it's just this idea that the more you open up about it, the more it leaves your mind. And over time, you can find yourself in a better situation. It's just, again, it's not something people talk about. Also, it's like we shouldn't feel guilty about leaving a job or getting let go. It's like that's just the circle of life. But the way you have to explain it, especially now, like we're going towards the holidays, a lot of our calls right now are themed around protecting yourself, having boundaries. How can you, in a healthy way, answer the conversations or answer the questions you don't want to answer? And a lot of the stress is stems from this guilt and shame. So,
Yeah, totally. And I hadn't really thought about it for the difference between somebody who made a choice to leave a company because it was a bad environment or they're looking for something new. And again, it
yeah,
shouldn't matter what your reason is, but
yeah,
there's, different feelings that come across for each of them.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then you just touched on this, but like setting boundaries in your personal life and any like tactics that you guys have found that worked, especially as the holidays are approaching. I know a lot of people who are unemployed that are like, I do not feel like talking to Aunt Susan or, cousin Mike about this. And is there a way that you guys have felt like that has worked, or anything else that you'd want to share on that piece?
Yeah, we actually yesterday, I host a networking call every Wednesday, and there's a different theme every week. And we started yesterday the series around like, okay, what's everyone going to say around the holidays, and who wants to talk about protecting yourself? And we came up with a lot of good suggestions that I'm putting into like a holidays 101 kind of like blog post or something, and I'm going to share it with everybody because we did come up with some things together. So one is, having a 1 to 2 sentence sort of pitch if somebody's asking, like, "Oh, how's the job search going?" or "What do you do?" or those sort of like small talk kind of
Mm-hmm.
questions, right? Like, how can you avoid those and stick to your script and then flip the question back on them? Another thing is understanding that boundaries are set. You can set boundaries, but you can't control if somebody respects your boundaries. So, having that level of comfort in what are my boundaries? What do I want to talk about? And knowing they're going to be crossed, and then figuring out what you do when they're crossed. The third thing we talked about is almost like assembling your own little army of like protectors and finding 2 to 3 people that will be at the Christmas party or the Thanksgiving or the Friendsgiving where you're like, hey, I can't handle this. And can you stay by my side? Or if somebody asks, can you be there to step in and change the conversation? And so, like, assembling that support system is really important. I have one of those. I've been jobless during 2 holiday seasons, so I'm like a pro at this. And then, the last thing that we sort of decided, we're gonna in Rhize have like a buddy system for the holidays. Like we have a mentorship program, but I think which is separate. But we're gonna do like a almost a buddy system where we match people with like a buddy that they can just text. If they're like, oh, my like aunt is like, she keeps asking me, she keeps saying, like, are you networking? Are you doing this? Just because half the time, like, I just wanna, like, go in a corner and text someone and be like, "Okay,
Yeah.
she's saying this again." So we're gonna set up a buddy system. I don't know what we'll call it, but I thought that was a nice idea that came out of the call yesterday, so you always have that person to go to.
I really, really love that. And you could
Yeah.
also like proactively check in on the other one, and it might be the time where they really need that message. Or, yeah,
Yes.
if you need to kind of bitch about someone who isn't respecting your boundaries, then you have
Yeah.
that outlet. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a great one.
We also talked about, like, look, it's the holidays. We all deserve to let off some steam or whatever. And I always said that my go-to whenever I'm in a situation or like a holiday party, I'm like, I just like try to be the fun one. I'm like, let's play a game. Let's do this. Like, we don't have to talk about this. We see each other like once a year. I'm like, just bring a game to the party. Be the person that like, you know, gets everybody like singing Christmas, whatever, anything different that has nothing to do with small talk I would prefer to do.
Yeah.
So, if you can just kind of go into it with an overly positive attitude, then no one's going to ask you because they're going to be like, "Oh, she seems fine. Let's not talk
Yeah.
about that."
I really like
So,
that. I
yeah.
also wish that everybody was a bit more self-aware around the holidays in general. Like, yes, if there's somebody in your life who's unemployed, but also there's just certain topics like, do we not have something better to talk about? We don't need to talk about politics. We don't need to talk, like, there's certain things it's like, come on, can we
Well,
not?
and everybody has their thing. Everybody has something they're going through. So it's like, how would you feel if I just asked you about that? It's
Ex-
like, why can't we just talk about something better? Like more
yes,
fun, more, I don't know. There's more questions to ask in this world. So,
totally. I'm
yeah.
personally looking forward to lots of people asking me why I'm not married and why I haven't started having children yet.
Oh my
So,
God. Like, what is it? Like, let's just talk about like lights on the trees or like something. I
yeah,
don't know. Like,
exactly. Um, all right. Well, and before we open it to Q&A, the last one, and we'll end on a little bit of a higher note, but
yeah.
and you kind of talked about this a little bit during the imposter syndrome section, but wins that aren't connected to your job or your job search. I think that's really important as you're thinking about like making progress and feeling like you're, making an impact. What are some of those that you guys talk about?
Oh, we talk about those a lot, actually. That was part of the conversation yesterday. So, personally, for me, my neighbor is an artist and she's teaching me how to oil paint. So, if somebody asks me something new in my life, like I am now getting like an art history and art painting class 101 from an amazing artist, and that's what I'll talk about. But like a woman yesterday in the group said she joined a women's hiking group, and so she's going to talk about that. We actually have a forum in the community where people submit their wins that aren't related to job loss. I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of parents that say that they got to see their child go to their first day of school, or like think like life things that you know you don't really think much about. Like there was a someone on the call yesterday who shared he's the first person in his family to graduate college, but also he was the first person in his family to move out of the state of New York. And so he said something that helps him is he writes down all of those things where he feels that he's breaking these generational barriers and boundaries. And he's like, even though I'm at this down point right now, I've still done all of this and this. So there's a lot of that in the community. And our theme for November, we like theme the months and the workshops is seeing unemployment through a lens of gratitude because it is Thanksgiving month. So like what can we give thanks to? Um, Especially, I mean, this time last year is when I got laid off for my third time. So I'm coming up on a year of like not having a traditional job. And yeah, it's important to come up with wins that aren't related to a job search or related to money.
Yeah,
Um, and
I
so
love that. It's just like reframing your mindset and
yeah.
thinking about like I kind of got chills when you were talking about the parent who got to see their kid go to school for the
Yeah.
first time because it's like little things like that that are really important. And if you're
Yeah.
it's like kind of helps to have a space where you can talk about that and, be proud of those accomplishments.
And everyone cheers each other on. Like I will sometimes comb through the wins channel because it is people do share when they get a job, but I would say the overwhelming majority of posts has nothing to do with wins in the job search. And people are sharing some like really deep things in there that they wouldn't share publicly on LinkedIn because,
Hmm.
LinkedIn is for accomplishments. But this space, you can share that somebody had a really big like health journey over the past
Hmm.
year and they shared all the details about it. And I'm like, that is so inspiring to
Yeah,
anybody. So
I
it's
love
just
it.
really nice. Yeah.
And it's like just more authentic and raw because I do feel like LinkedIn
Yeah.
tends to be a highlight reel, and it's like, oh, I'm humbled to announce,
Yeah.
dot
Yeah.
dot dot. I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, keep scrolling.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I love that.
Yeah.
Um, all right, well, I'm gonna scroll through the comments. I think I'm just getting a lot of people that are like just love what the conversation has touched on. Not as many comments, but
Good.
somebody else, I have imposter syndrome big time. Ditto. I think we all do.
Yeah.
Um, someone had a tip for imposter syndrome. So knowing my skills with confidence and speaking positively about myself and my efforts has helped. I like that.
The affirmations, daily affirmations, I think are probably a huge thing that I should get into.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Another person who's experienced 2 layoffs. The second one turned out to be one of the best things that could have happened. Though I would have preferred to make that choice myself, it ultimately led me to a much better place financially. So thank you, former employer. I
That
like
is
that
something a lot
mindset.
of us try to talk about too, is like where we would be if we were still at our job and where we are now. And I think when you talk about those things or write them down, you're surprised by the positives. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Then we had one person, I love this discussion. Another one said, this has been a great conversation.
good.
Okay, we have a question. What wisdom can you share about the current state of the job market to someone who was recently laid off that may be different from 3-ish years ago?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. So because I've been laid off so many times, I feel like it's just a different job market. I will say that. I think, this job market was the worst of the three that I was looking in this past year. And I have read, and I'm not an expert, but I have read that it was worse than '08.
Yes.
Now, a lot of that had to do with where we were at with the year, with it being an election year, there's all these things that contributed to that. It also is the holidays right now, so it might be just slow in general, but I'm hopeful that things will clear up in the new year. I know that we try to report on what industries seem to be doing well and all of that. But I'm not an expert. I'm not an economist, so I don't want to give bad advice. But I just try to be positive and hopeful, and I'm really hoping that companies start to, put jobs out there when they're actually hiring, or start a practice where they are interviewing people, communicating clearly with them, and letting them know every step of the way. Because most people in the group, when you get laid off, you want to plan for 12 plus months of
Mm-hmm.
not having work right now. That's just the norm, is planning for 12 plus months. Whereas before it was like 6 to 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I
So
will say, like, another thing that's different from 3-ish years ago, like you've touched on this, but like it was a candidates market, after
oh yeah,
COVID. And so candidates had a lot more leverage and a lot more say in the
exactly.
process. And now it's an employer's market. And
Hmm.
so,
Hmm.
candidate experience in some cases is taking a hit, as you mentioned. There's not always clarity and transparency in the process. And it's also just a lot more competitive. And so
Yeah.
it's taking longer to find a job, but you also, might have to apply to more jobs in order to secure an interview than a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say those are two of the main differences. I have heard from a few different people that and this is recruiters, that they think the market is taking a turn in the right direction. It is November, so Giovanna mentioned this. I wouldn't say completely slow down or pull out at all. But, I would say bust it for the, next couple of weeks. And I think if you can get interviews in the next couple of weeks, you could have a shot at getting hired before end of year. But I think when I'd really plan to hit the ground running would be, Q1. But you can do a lot to prepare for that. Figuring out the exact types of jobs and companies that you want to go after, who you can network with, et cetera, to set yourself up for success.
That's how we're sort of ending the programming for the year with Rhize. Like, and I know you're coming in to teach, how to use Earn Better. We have members in the group that already use it and are a champion of the product. And so I want to make sure people know how to use these things before the end of the year. We're going to use December. So November is like seeing unemployment and your situation through a lens of gratitude. And December is all about year in review and then your goal setting for the new year. And so all of our workshops are based on how do we set ourselves up. The job market's slow during Christmas season, holiday season, but there are things you can do to make sure that when January rolls around, your resume is in place, what companies you want. Maybe you've started networking, reaching out, maybe sending holiday cards, like stupid things like that maybe will make a difference. And so, I think that's our whole goal is we don't want people to feel like they have to stop their search just because everybody else is on vacation or whatever. So,
and there are certainly companies that are trying to hire people before the holidays and are trying to get those roles filled before end of year so that they have people, in seat and ready. So I wouldn't say, slow down or, think that it's impossible to land a job before the end of the year.
No, it's good prep time.
Let's see. We have another comment. I was laid off in February after working 24 years for the same company. I have been a member of the Rhize community for almost 6 months now, and it's been such a wonderful, supportive place to help through this challenging job market.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
The next one's geared towards me. So when generating custom docs on Earn Better, should I be going in to edit them? And so what she's asking about, we have a tool that if you find a job you want to apply for, you can click a button to customize your resume and cover letter for that specific role. It takes like 30 seconds. It is AI generated. So we do tell people you should review it, make sure it resonates, make sure it's accurate. You don't necessarily need to edit it. The only thing I would say there is if there's something that you really want to add based off the role that you're applying for, feel free. Otherwise, I would just give it a quick review to make sure, everything resonates and then you can use it.
I love that because I think these tools are amazing to help people, but I think sometimes we rely too much on the tool. And the whole, premise of what we're doing is we want people to have the right tools to empower them to know what they're doing. So they don't have to rely on a tool or they don't have to hire someone to do their resume. That's why I'm excited for you to come in and teach everyone how to use it.
Yeah, totally. And just like I wouldn't use an output from ChatGPT, just copy and paste it blindly.
Right.
AI is lovely, but you want to make sure that you're reviewing it and adding a personal touch where it makes sense.
Yeah.
Someone just joined Rhize. They commented, so that's awesome.
Welcome.
We have another question. Any tips or tricks you can give on interviewing with confidence? I'm happy to go first here.
Yeah, you start.
I've had you kind of on the hot seat all day.
Okay.
I would say the biggest game changer for interviewing is preparation and practicing ahead of time. And I think if you look up the company or the role, and we also have a bunch of free interview prep tools on Earn Better if people are looking for those, you can get a sense for the types of questions that are going to be asked, learn a little bit more about the company, and then practice your answers out loud. I cannot stress that enough. I will have something in my head of how I want to say something. And then when I go to actually say it, I'm never as articulate the first time. And so you'd just be surprised by if you practice, pick 3 or 4 questions, practice those out loud. The second or third time you do it, you're going to sound 1,000 times better. And I believe this is true for like anyone at any level. And so I think practicing is key. And then you kind of work out the kinks before you get into the real thing. And then when you're actually interviewing, you're like, oh, I got this. I know how I'm going to answer this. I've got a couple examples already prepared. So if they ask me a couple situational questions, it's not like I'm just digging through my brain like, oh my gosh, what have I done the past 15 years, you know? So that would be my advice. I don't know if anything to add there, Giovanna.
That's great advice because I ramble a lot. So I could tell when I was practicing or when I didn't, and I wasn't like concise in my answer. We are doing something in the new year. So we love the interview prep tools. Some feedback we've gotten from members is that they would love to have a person on the other side giving real feedback because it can be a tool, but you're not getting the body language, you're not getting the and so we're going to start an interview prep. I don't know if it's going to be a call. We're trying to figure out the best way to do it. If it's like going to be some sort of call with breakout rooms or if we're going to pair people, but the goal is like, you want to share these things with a person because when you get on the other side, I get nervous now I'm fine because like I'm not trying to get a job here, so I'm just chit chatting. But if as soon as the screen pops up, depending on what the other person is wearing, what their face, like if they're smiling, if they're not smiling, I'm like, either I know this is going to go well or I'm super nervous. And so I think practicing with a person who can give you body language and all of that, facial expressions, that helps. At least that helps me, and a lot of people in the community. So yeah,
Totally. I
yeah,
think practicing with a real person
yeah.
is the best thing you can do. If you
Hmm.
don't have somebody to practice with, you can always do it in the mirror. We have AI practice interviews at Earn Better, so you can practice with our AI system. It'll actually ask you the questions and it simulates it, so you kind of feel like you're in an interview. And
Hmm.
then you do get feedback immediately. So that's nice as far as getting feedback on like what you did well, how you can improve, what you might want to incorporate moving forward. But I
Yeah,
think at the end of the day, just practicing at all in whatever way works for you is gonna help you on the confidence front.
agreed.
Okay, we have another one, and I know we're a couple minutes over, so maybe we just take one or two more, and then we can wrap. But we've got any tips for those looking for fully remote work?
Um,
I will say, finding fully remote jobs is more difficult than it has been in the past few months, just
yeah,
because there are fewer openings that are completely remote. So if you're open to hybrid, I think that opens up, how many jobs and opportunities would be out there. If you are focused on fully remote, I would say you're going to have to probably submit a few more applications than you would if you were looking for in person or hybrid, just because they are more competitive. There's fewer of those types of jobs and there's more people going after them. The only other thing I would add is stick to applying to the ones where you're really qualified. Just
yeah.
because you don't want to waste time on submitting applications where you might not be the best fit, because they're going to have, in most cases, and I know people don't want to hear this, but hundreds, if not thousands of applicants. So I would just focus on the ones where you are qualified and interested and would be a good fit.
I would agree with that. And I do know we talk about the different there's some resources that are supposed to have all remote jobs on them. None of us really know if it's worth it or not and how there's a lot of information out there, right? So I do agree with Molly that there are way less now. Also, like if you go in the office, you get to make some new friends. So part of me is like, just go for the hybrid. Like you can work from home and do your laundry sometimes, but like get out. I love being out with people. So if you
Yeah.
can, maybe open your mind up to something like that.
Which could be easier for some people based off where they're located.
Exactly. I know people made moves during COVID, and I know that that's a big challenge right now. Is a lot of people moved when they were fully remote, and then their companies want to bring them back, and they're like, "Well, I moved 3 states away. I can't.
Yeah,
I can't go back." So
cost of living is a lot
yeah,
cheaper, and I'm not leaving.
yeah.
The only other thing I'd add is, if you've done remote work previously, make sure that is clear on your resume, because employers that are hiring for remote roles typically are, more interested in people who have done it previously,
Hmm.
just because that's just one less barrier to think through.
That's a good point.
Okay, so the last one, are employers tracking applications that use AI to help draft resumes and cover letters? I always use it as a first draft and then make edits so it's accurate. First off, I think that's a great practice. Use
Yeah.
it for a first draft, review it, make any edits that you see fit. To my knowledge, employers are not tracking applications that use AI. I've heard of this a few times, but I've yet to see it, and I've yet to see it in practice or
Mm.
actually talk to an employer who does this. And most of the recruiters and talent acquisition folks I talk to, they're not against people using AI if they're using it in the right way. And I would
Right.
say this is an example of using it the right way, getting a first
Yes.
draft. What I think an example of a bad use case or a use case that would probably be a turnoff for a recruiter or someone in TA would be using like one of those auto apply companies where like you're just having somebody else blast out applications on your behalf and you
Yeah.
don't really know where you're applying. And I'm not judging anybody who uses those. Like if that's working for you, you do you. But I think that is pumping a lot of more noise into the system. And sometimes people are applying to jobs that they're not interested in or qualified for. And again, it's just kind of adding more friction into the system.
Yeah.
But I think there's good ways to use AI and bad ways. And it's as long as you're doing it responsibly, it's helping you save time, but you're, being like ethical in how you use it. I think there's nothing wrong with it. I
You're
actually,
100%. I think you're right with everything that you said. And I just think it's your work too, right? So you can, what is that? I remember when I was working in this company, oh, garbage in, garbage out. You know, when you have a CRM, that's what the company said.
yeah.
Garbage in, garbage out. So it's like if you're just kind of throwing stuff out there, you're not going to get a response. I think in Rise, I've realized the people that are really succeeding are the ones that are taking that extra minute, that extra step. Instead of applying for 1,000 jobs, they're maybe applying for 100, or instead of
Yeah.
applying for 100 a week, they've brought it down to 10 a week. So it's just,
Being
yeah.
a little bit more strategic and focused,
Mhm.
I think is a better strategy than the spray and pray.
Yeah.
I know that some people do the spray and pray because they've been on the job search for a while, or they might be desperate. So again, like absolutely no judgment, and you have to do what works for you. But I do think that if you can be a little bit more strategic and making sure that you're applying to stuff where you're actually a good fit, you're actually
Mhm.
interested, in the long run, that's going to do you a lot more good.
Agree.
All right. Well, we're 15 minutes over. There's a few other comments, but it's mostly comments. Someone wants a Rise T-shirt, Giovanna.
Oh my God, this is one of one right now. So we're gonna be doing some merch in the new year. I'm a big merch girl. I probably buy way too much. So we're gonna work with people in the community to design things based on what we say in the community. So it's gonna be really cool. So if you get in there, maybe you can help design it.
Perfect. Love it.
So
Um, all right. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. To the folks that are still on
yeah.
the call, if anybody has feedback, comments, questions, anything that we didn't address or you want us to kind of double tap into, feel free to reach out to either of us directly. But
Mhm.
thank you all for coming out today and hope everyone has a good rest of their Thursday and a good rest of their week.
Thank you. Thanks for
Bye
having me.
bye.
Bye.
Oh.